What's happening? Welcome back to another video on the Fly Fishing Academy. And so what I want to do on this video, since the runoff is happened to be upon us, and a lot of people are reaching out asking, is the river clear at XYZ location, and what are the flows like? So a really cool app that the government of Alberta has put together is the Alberta Rivers app. And what they've done here is they have taken their data, which they collect, which used to be so archaic on how you had to go onto the website and load it and try to read it. So what they've done is they've just taken all that data, they've streamlined it, no pun intended, into an app so that we can go and check constantly different locations. And we don't have to know precisely what the location is called, because on their app there's it's all done geographically on a map. So basically what I want to show you guys is kind of just how to elementary read some of the data that they give us. I don't understand all of the data, and I know that you can dig super deep into this and read a bunch of historical stuff and try to predict flows and water levels throughout the summer. But what I want to show you here is how to read these, how to read them based upon your watershed that you want to know information about. And thirdly, we can go and look at some of the snowpacks, see how much water's left, and kind of see where runoff's at. And then the last thing what I want to do is just show you how to follow upstream. Maybe you can get a little bit of prediction as to, especially on the tailwaters, when the dam's releasing water, just kind of see what they're releasing and about how long it'll take until it gets down to your stream. I do know that some of the reservoirs do give 3-day forecasts as to what they'll be releasing. Not always accurate. So anyways, let's jump into the app. I have it set up on my iPad here, and so let's try to work through this and just kind of go over a few different things that the app has. Hopefully we can try to simplify some of that data that they're showing us, and it'll help us understanding the volume that are in certain rivers, especially now when waters are getting high, as it is runoff. A note here, what won't happen is they will not tell you water clarity. So basically your app's going to show up looking like something like this. We see the province of Alberta, and there's a lot of data that is on this map. And you can see at the bottom there, it says high stream flow. And so there's a region there that is highlighted in yellow, and that kind of tells us what they're talking about as far as high stream flows. If it goes red, those are super high, probably flood watches are in place. So let's start off with the Bow River. But first of all, what we need to do is kind of set up our apps so that it is more enticing to us as end users. So what you can do is you can take all of these markers or stations here that we see, and we can eliminate a lot of those. So on the side of our app over there, it shows us, let's just move me out of the way, and we can see that we have my stations, rivers, lakes, precipitation, snow pillow, ice, and media. What we're going to focus on here is the snow pillow, rivers and lakes, and my stations. So when I click off of the rivers and lakes, we can see that they all disappear. When I click back on them, all of my stations show back up, and there's a lot of them there. So what you guys need to do to personalize this app is just go through and find your stations that you like. So let's take this one in Calgary here, and then on the bottom of it, I just downloaded this, so it's just trying to show us how to use this. But anyways, let's pop on this, and at the star there, I'm going to hit it and it's going to turn white. So now when I hit my stations, I can turn off all the rivers and lakes and turn on my stations. And now I'm just seeing my stations and the ones that I want to see that are pertinent to me as a more personalized approach to this app. So I'm going to turn off my stations, turn back on rivers and lakes, and let us open up the first reading here that we'll talk about. So this is just upstream of St. Patrick's Island, and this is basically giving us a readout of the Bow River. So let's just take it for what it is. And we've got two numbers there, the water level and then the flow rates. Let's focus on the flow rates. That's what's important here. And so we see this number 233.09. Okay, it tells us the time at which that is read, which is 4:05 right now. As I'm recording this, it's 4:35, so it's 30 minutes behind. That's pretty up-to-date information, which is super cool. So that number 239, what does that even mean? So that's cubic meters per second. That is the flow rate, the volume of water. That number means nothing because every watershed will have a different number or volume of water that they can carry. So if we were to take this number, which for the Bow River is a lot, and then put that on the Old Man, the Upper Old Man, that is an absolute complete disaster flood. Okay, so we need to know what the numbers are comparative to our rivers and comparative to the historical data in those rivers. So say you're going to go, you've never been to the Bow River before and you want to check the flows here. Well, 233. What is 233 and how does that correlate to the Bow River being high or low? So on the right side, you're going to see some icons here. There's 5 of them. And the top 3 are what we're going to focus on. And I told you what that star does is that flags it as your station. So we have it flagged, the Bow River. That's my station, and that's how I personalize this app. So let's start at the top of that, and we see this one here gives us table data. So this is pretty up to date, and it doesn't show us any kind of graphs, which the next 2 will. This just shows us the data. Flows cubic meters per second, and it tells us in 5-minute intervals. And not all stations read every 5 minutes, but on this one, we do get a reading every 5 minutes. So we can kind of look back and say, 233, 226, 222, 215, 214, 211. And that's all from about 10:55 this morning. So from about 210 all the way up to 233, I guess the water's going up. That's kind of one piece of data we can correlate from that. But still, that doesn't mean anything per se. So let's go down to the next icon here, and we get ourselves a chart. This is super cool because this is the one that we really want to focus on. The bottom one, we're just going to ignore. That's the levels, which we talked about before. So what we have here is the calculated flows, the normal flow, and the water level. Water level, let's ignore. What we need to understand in this top graph in the flows is the upper quartile, which is the top blue line, and the lower quartile, which is the bottom blue line. So those are, let's say, low average and high average. And then the gray area is kind of historically where the water has flowed at this time of the year in that river. So what we're going to see here is that on the far side of the screen, we are now leaving the upper quartile, which is normal high for this time. So we got a lot of water. This is telling me that runoff is happening because we have a lot of water. So that number 233, 220, whatever, that's when we jump into this graph and we can see what's normal for this river. So if we go back and we look about June 1st, June 2nd, and the week previous, those flows were very consistent. Could be fishable water. It's the clarity we don't know about, okay? But then you can see that there's a couple giant spikes there. That's a lot of water coming down. Being that it's a tailwater, it's probably the dam release. Take note of that because now we can go upstream and figure out what's being released from the dam. Whatever your watershed is, you need to go to it and find out what is the gray area, What is the normal flows for that time of the year? And then you're going to be able to understand, is the water high? Is the water low? Which could give you some indication of fishability. Again, we still don't know the clarity. You're going to have to make the drive to check that out for yourself, or ask your buddies who live out there. But for just sticking to the Bow River to keep it simple, this can happen on all rivers, okay? We could see we're middle of the flow, probably, well, I was out fishing the other day and it was all right. In that nice, steady, calm flow, that's what trout love. That's what we look for. These spikes, they're not great, okay? We're reading this data, but what I encourage all of you guys to do is take this data and track it over 3 or 4 years, because then you know on those days that you fish those waters at certain levels, how it's going to fish. So you might have a watershed that says, hey, if it hits 80, I know it's good fishing. And now you can check out these charts through this app and say, it hit 80 and I'm going to head out there. A lot of other factors in play, but hey, why not give it a try? Write down your data and see what happens. So the third icon here is now just going to show us a yearly view of what's happened historically on the Bow River. And we can see as we kind of zoom in there, we're getting high, water's getting high, maybe runoff's coming a little early, but what that tells us is that that high level is typically June, and it starts coming down July, August, September, October, November, and that takes us into the winter months. So that's just historical data for the entire year. You can kind of see we had an early spring melt before May, which was not typical. And if you've been fishing the Bow this year, you would have noticed that our ground melt happened sooner than normal. And that's what that little bit of a spike is right there. So those are the 3 icons that we really want to pay attention to. But we can't be misled by tributaries, because like this flow rate right here, it shows us the flow of the Bow above elbow. You can see the elbow puts in right there at St. Patrick's. It's not calculating the volume of that river coming in. So you can read that flow and say, oh, it's 160. I love 160. And then you get down there and it's absolutely raging. And you're like, I don't think that was the right reading. Well, what you forgot to do is check out what the Elbow River, a tributary below the reading, is doing. So that's hitting us at about 26.5. Again, is that high? Is that low? Well, let's check on our graph and we can say it's just a little above normal right now, which is saying that's also a tailwater coming from the reservoir, and probably runoff conditions are what's happening right there. So if you add those 2 numbers, you're probably going to get your reading for the actual Bow River. As you move down the Bow River, okay, you got more tributaries coming in. The Highwood happens down low. So it depends where you put in the Bow or where you want to fish the Bow. You've got to add these tributaries into play. So the Highwood, it's a really good read here. We can click on the second icon there and we can see, hey, it's pretty typical right now. It's probably runoff given the conditions we've seen around the other creeks, but it's not raging right now for this time of the year. It's just kind of right in that average, and that's a beautiful thing to see. But it's pumping at 83, so now you've got to add that to the 230 plus the elbow plus the Highwood, and then that takes us further downstream, which gives us a reading at Carsland, and that reading there is pumping around 260. So that's kind of taken into consideration all the water that's coming into the Bow River and how to read that. The other thing we can do is we can move upstream on the Bow River and we can hit all the way up to Ghost Lake, which is the dam. Click on the reading there and say, what is the flows that are coming out of the dam? Because that's going to give us a good indication as to what the flows will be soon enough in Calgary. So we read them here, pumping at 286. So they're letting out quite a bit of water. Okay. Now, how do you read the dams? Because they're different. They're not river flows. They're more storage capacity and what they're letting out. So let's click on the top icon right there, and we can see some data here. It tells us the volume of the dam. Again, that stuff irrelevant. What's important here though is to understand that the dam is about 22% full right now. I believe up until the first week of July, they have to keep the dam around 20%. So if you see that go up to 26, you know a lot of water is going to be let out really soon. I'm not sure the exact regulations they have to hold the dam, but what you can do is say 286, they're letting out water. Another trick here is to see what's coming into the dam. Is the dam filling up? Well, let's check the flow rates above the dam, and it's at 231. So we can see on our charts that's super high. The water's pumping up there, and it's probably because we've had about 4 or 5 30-degree days Celsius, and that's starting to melt the snowpack. So water's coming in pretty hot and heavy, but they're letting out a little more than they're bringing in, which tells us that 286, 20%, 22% full. They're probably bringing that dam down to 20% by letting out more than they're holding in. So now let's keep moving upstream. We've now hit the Freestone section of the Bow River, and that's the part that flows through Canmore and all the way up to Banff. So now in the town of Banff, we have a reading, and this one here is pumping at 213. So when you think about how small the river is upstream in Banff, that's about the same volume that's coming through the city of Calgary. So without even clicking on this chart right now, I know that's a lot of water coming into Banff right now, and I'm going to show you guys as we keep moving upstream to find out where this water's coming from. So let's click on this chart, and just as suspected, that's a lot of water. So you can see typically it's about 120, so that's almost dangerous. There could be some bank spillage, some flood issues, warnings happening up there in Banff, because they have a lot of water that's coming down right now. But it's good, because it means runoff is happening, and hopefully we can get that over sooner than later. So now what we need to do, okay, we've basically ran the Bow River. Hope that makes sense, especially for you guys to understand kind of what's typical in a yearly sense, kind of what's typical in a weekly sense, and then you can jump down to every 5 minutes and find your readouts here. Remember, in Banff, that's not dam controlled. That is just freestone, and whatever comes down the mountains is what comes into that section of the river. Okay, so now what I want you guys to do is click off of rivers and lakes, zoom out a little bit, and let's hit snow pillow. And then an icon pops up down here like a snowflake. Okay, so there's a couple places that melt into the Bow River. One of them here is Skokie, which is empty. Okay, so Skokie Lodge is a good reading. We melted a little early, so you can see that blue line drops right down, and the gray is typical. So we've got introduced to a new line here, and that's the red line. And so that red line tells us what last year was. And we had a lot of snow last year that took a lot longer to melt. And so that shows the volumes last year compared to this year. But I still think we're okay. We definitely had some hot weather this past week, and that ended the melt at Skokie. We'll go back to the main app here. And then we're going to go down and zoom in on Sunshine Village, which is a big source of water for the Bow River. We click on Sunshine Village, and they give us a millimeter. There's no flows. This is snow pillow, remember? So we're going to click on that second graph again, and this is going to give us kind of a readout similar to the flows, but a little different. And it's going to have the blue and the red line. The red line is last year's flow data, or water equivalent value. And the blue line is this year's, where we're at right now. So you can see these drops in the blue, okay? And it's kind of typical during the day. Once the things start heating up, it melts, and then it kind of steadies off, and that's why we're seeing those bumps, those kind of heartbeats like that. So there's a lot of water left at Sunshine, and we're at June 3rd. We've got flows of 200 plus coming into the Freestone section in Banff. We know runoff's happening. There's a lot of water coming, which is good. Manage the dam properly, and we're going to have a lot of good water for this summer. Things that can affect this is a lot of rain. A lot of rain and a lot of heat coming all at once is why we flooded in 2013. So right now, I feel this is good. This is pretty cool. You guys understand how we're going to read where the water's coming from, how much water's left. So if you're getting antsy and you're worrying about, man, this runoff seems like it's taking forever, go up to the snow pillow, see where the water's at, and then maybe go fish a lake or two around here. So basically, you guys can take what I just showed you and you can apply that to any river that they have data for. You can go all the way down southern Alberta here and you can start clicking on snowpacks and finding where they drain into, and to see, oh my goodness, we got lots of water down there. Just quick glance at this, that makes me smile. We got lots of water. Come down a little further, and I'm not sure where all of these snow pillows drain into, but again, Lost Creek South, look at that. We got lots of water down there. So we know we've got some runoff happening. We know we got lots of water. You guys now know how to kind of read. I'm gonna click off the snow pillows. You're gonna know how to read that stuff, and you're gonna know how to kind of get an idea as to what your favorite river is doing. Maybe we can go down here and kind of click on a couple more. So this would be Old Man, and this is above the dam there. So it's pumping at 78, and let's check out what's normal. We've got melt coming. It's kind of high normal. Cool. It's runoffs happening down there. I would suspect that water's pretty dirty, so I probably wouldn't make the 2-hour drive to go fishing. But let's check. Maybe this is Racehorse. So this is quite a bit smaller creek, and it's flowing high. Runoffs happening down there too. Pretty guarantee that river is super chocolatey right now, and it's not open up that high, but the lower part of the Old Man is, so you can definitely read those flows down there. So basically, that's kind of the data that I go off of that helps me understand the river flows. It helps me understand what the condition of the rivers are. Again, what we can't understand through that is it chocolate? Is it dirty? But like I tell people all the time, go for a drive. Part of fly fishing, a big part of it is the journey. Grab a couple buddies, go for a drive, get an idea of where your flows are at, and if they're kind of mid-average, like the middle of the gray area, go for a drive. And if you get out there and they're dirty, chuck some flies, see what happens. You never know. Sometimes that's when the biggest fish come to play. So yeah, you can download this app, AB Rivers, and it's also a website, albertarivers.ca, I believe is what it's called. But the app is super cool. Set up your favorite stations, and you guys can do a lot of cool things like that because it's customizable. And once you kind of know a few of those tricks that I showed you, now you can start extrapolating that data and making conclusions on your own. So make sure you guys get out there. Even though it's runoff, there's lots of really cool places to fish. There's lots of lakes around Alberta, pike, walleye, rainbows, chironomids, all the fun things. If you're into staring at an indicator sitting on a lake, that can be a lot of fun too. So make sure you guys have a safe June. If you are out on the rivers and they are high, be careful. It doesn't hurt to carry a throw bag with you. It doesn't carry to even have one of those hip life jackets, because bad things happen when the water's super high. So until then, I'm Dana Lattery with the Fly Fishing Academy, Fly Fishing Bow River Outfitters. Love people, catch fish, and we'll see you next time.